My parents hated my boyfriend. Dad offered him money to disappear, while Mom accidentally spilled wine on him at every dinner and created dating profiles for me behind my back. When he refused their bribe, they cut off my tuition and said I deserved someone from our circle, not a nobody. Now they're bombarding me with frantic calls about my concerning behavior. So I have been dating James for almost a year now, and honestly, it's been the most amazing relationship of my life. Like, we literally met in the most unexpected way possible during that huge storm that hit our city last April. My Uber canceled on me when I was downtown, and I was stuck in this torrential downpour without an umbrella, because who checks the weather forecast anymore, LMAO. I ducked into this tiny bookstore to wait it out and was just browsing around trying not to drip all over their merchandise when this cute guy who worked there started chatting with me about the book I was looking at. We ended up talking for like an hour and somehow got onto the topic of our favorite childhood cartoons. He's a Batman, the animated series guy, which is correct BTW. When the rain finally let up, he literally offered me his umbrella to take, because he only lived 2 blocks away. I tried to refuse, but he insisted, saying I could return it sometime. So obviously I had to come back to return it, right? We exchanged numbers and started texting, and it just felt so easy and natural. He asked me out for coffee that weekend, and the rest is history. James is literally the sweetest person I've ever met. He's smart, funny, hardworking, and treats me with so much respect. He's not from money like at all. He grew up with a single mom in a pretty rough neighborhood and put himself through community college while working full-time. I admire his work ethic so much. Like, this man never complains even when things are tough. So here's where my problem starts. My parents are, well, they're not exactly snobs, but they definitely have expectations about who I should date. We're not super rich or anything, but my dad is successful, and my mom comes from an old family, whatever that means in America, LMAO. They paid for my private school education and my college tuition at a pretty expensive art school, which I'm grateful for, but they act like this means they get to approve every decision I make. When I first mentioned James, they seemed skeptical, but said they were looking forward to meeting him. I should have known something was up because my mom immediately asked where he went to school and what his parents did. When I told her he went to community college and his mom was a nurse's aide, she got this look on her face. The first dinner with my parents was a complete disaster. My mom accidentally spilled red wine on James's shirt within 10 minutes of him arriving. He was so gracious about it, laughing it off and saying it wasn't his interview shirt anyway. But then she did it again at the next dinner 2 weeks later. Like, how do you accidentally spill wine on the same person twice? And both times she barely apologized, just handed him a napkin and said something about how some stains never come out. After that, things got progressively worse. My mom started sending me links to dating apps just for fun and articles about how relationships formed in your early 20s rarely last. Then last week, I borrowed her iPad to look something up, and guess what I found? Dating profiles. For me. On 3 different dating apps. With recent photos she must have taken from my Instagram, and these super cringe bios that made me sound like I was looking for a husband with a trust fund or something. When I confronted her, she actually tried to defend it. Said she was just keeping my options open, and that James seemed nice enough but not quite right for the long term. I was livid. I slammed my hand on the counter and told her it was completely inappropriate and invasive. She acted hurt and said she was only thinking about my future. I literally walked out and slammed the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. Good. Maybe that'll wake her up to how serious I am. Then at Sunday dinner, yes, my family still does forced Sunday dinners, my dad started making these comments about how James's bookstore probably isn't financially viable in the digital age with Amazon taking over everything, and asked if he had considered a more stable career path. Mom chimed in asking if I was really sure about settling down so young, and reminded me that my cousin Teresa just got engaged to a guy whose family owns half the real estate in their town. James has been so patient through all of this. Like, patience of a saint level. He keeps saying he understands that they're just protective of me, but I can see it starting to wear on him. Last week after dinner, he was really quiet on the drive home. When I asked what was wrong, he just sighed and said, "I don't think your parents will ever see me as good enough for you." It broke my heart because he is good enough. He's better than good enough. The final straw came last night when I was at my parents' house helping my dad set up his new MacBook, because apparently being under 30 automatically makes me tech support. I went to the kitchen to get some water and overheard my parents talking. My dad literally said, "That boy is just using her. He probably sees her as his meal ticket." My mom agreed and said they needed to intervene before things get too serious. I was so shocked I dropped the glass I was holding and it shattered on the floor. They both came running in and saw me standing there with tears streaming down my face. Instead of apologizing, my dad doubled down. He said they were just concerned about my future stability and that I deserved someone from our circle. I lost it. Like, completely lost it. I told them James has never once asked me for money or taken advantage of me in any way. If anything, he's annoyingly independent and insists on paying his fair share even though I make more than him right now with my freelance work. He's supportive of my goals and genuinely interested in what I do. He remembers little details about things I like and surprises me with thoughtful gifts that never cost much but always mean a lot. I told them they were being elitist and judgmental, and if they couldn't respect my choices, they could stay out of my personal life. My mom actually had the audacity to say, "We're just trying to protect you from making a mistake." I told her the only mistake would be letting them bully me into ending the best relationship I've ever had. My dad got all red in the face and told me I was being dramatic and ungrateful after all they've done for me. I grabbed my stuff and left, ignoring my mom calling after me. I texted them later that I needed space, but they've been blowing up my phone with paragraphs about how I'm throwing away my future and being manipulated. I'm seriously considering moving in with James, but I'm worried about what my parents might do. They're still helping with my student loans, and I'm on their family phone plan and health insurance until next year. I don't want to be financially dependent on them, but let's be real, my freelance income is not enough to cover everything yet. Has anyone dealt with parents like this? James says I should try to talk to them calmly one more time, but honestly, I'm afraid I'll just end up screaming or crying or both. Part of me wants to just block them on everything and go no contact, but they're still my parents, and as toxic as they're being right now, I know they think they're looking out for me in their extremely misguided way. But I'm not going to let them drive away the best thing that's ever happened to me, just because he doesn't fit their narrow definition of success. James is kind, honest, hardworking, and treats me like I'm the most important person in his world. That's worth more than any fancy degree or family connections. Should I confront them directly? I'm worried if I move in with James, they'll completely cut me off financially, and while that would suck, maybe it would be worth it to be free from their judgment. I feel so stuck between the family I was born into and the person I want to build a future with. First update. Okay, so first of all, thank you to everyone who commented on my last post. I read literally every single comment and was honestly shocked at how supportive everyone was. I showed some of them to James and he got all quiet and said it was nice to know people were on our side, which made me realize we needed to have a bigger conversation because something was definitely up with him. The night after I posted, we were at his place watching YouTube, and during a break I just flat out asked him if something was bothering him besides my parents' obvious rudeness. Y'all. He got this really uncomfortable look on his face and was like, "There's something I need to tell you, but I didn't know how." Turns out last week my dad called James and asked him to meet for coffee. James thought maybe my dad was finally trying to make an effort to get to know him, so he said yes. But when they met at Starbucks, my dad spent like 5 minutes with small talk before getting to the real point. My father offered James $10,000 to break up with me and disappear from my life, like an actual check, that he pulled out of his jacket pocket and slid across the table like some kind of movie villain. James said he just stared at it in complete shock before pushing it back and telling my dad he wasn't interested. My dad apparently got all red in the face and said he could make it 15 if that's what it takes. I literally couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like, I knew my parents were being awful, but this is next level psycho behavior. James said he told my dad that he loved me and wasn't going anywhere. And my dad basically threatened him, saying something about how men like you always leave eventually when something better comes along anyway. James said he walked out at that point, but he's been wrestling with whether to tell me for days. He was afraid it would completely ruin my relationship with my parents, but also didn't want to keep secrets from me. He looked so stressed telling me this, like he thought I might not believe him or something. I was shaking, like full-on trembling with rage. I immediately called my dad, even though it was like 11 at night. And when he answered all groggy, I just went off. I asked him if he thought my relationship was just some transaction he could pay his way out of. He tried to act confused at first, but when I mentioned the specific amount and the Starbucks, he knew he was caught. And then, he tried to defend it, said he was investing in my future, and that he knew how these things go, and that James would take the money eventually. I was screaming so loud that my neighbor knocked on the wall. James had to physically take the phone from me because I was about to throw it against the wall. I couldn't sleep all night. James kept trying to calm me down, but I was just so hurt and angry. The next morning, I texted my mom asking if she knew about this. She sent back this long paragraph about how they were just concerned and how these early relationships rarely last. And wouldn't it be better to find out now rather than later if he's really in it for the right reasons? The right reasons? Like what? Like the family bank account? I texted back that the only person treating me like an ATM was them, trying to control me through money. So I decided we needed to have this out in person. I drove to their house that evening. James offered to come, but I thought that would just make things more explosive. When I got there, they were both acting all concerned, like I was having some kind of breakdown. My mom tried to hug me, and I literally stepped back and told her not to touch me. We sat down in the living room, and I just laid it all out. I told them I knew about the bribe, and that I'd never been so disappointed in them in my entire life. My dad had the nerve to say it was just a test to see if James was the real deal. Like, what? That's not a test. That's emotional manipulation. My mom started crying, her go-to move whenever she's losing an argument, and saying they just wanted what was best for me. I asked them straight up, what exactly about James isn't best for me? Is it that he's kind, supportive, hardworking, honest? Dad actually said, and I quote, "He's not from our circle, Megan. You deserve someone with a background and connections that can help your future, not hinder it." I literally laughed in his face. I told him James has never hindered me, only supported every single thing I want to do. I asked if by our circle, he meant people with money, because that seemed to be their only actual objection. That's when my mom got all huffy and said I was being deliberately obtuse and that life isn't a fairy tale and love doesn't pay the bills. I pointed out that I've been making my own money for 2 years now with my freelancing, and she had the audacity to say, "Yes, darling, but who paid for the education that allows you to do that?" And there it was, the financial hammer. I knew it was coming, but it still hit hard. My dad leaned forward with this super patronizing look and said they'd thought about it carefully and decided to give me an ultimatum. Either I come to my senses and break up with James, or they would stop paying my tuition for my final semester and cut me off financially. I stood up so fast I knocked over a glass of water on their coffee table. I told them they couldn't buy me any more than they could buy James. My dad stood up too, and we were literally yelling at each other across the living room. He kept saying I was making an emotional decision I'd regret, and I told him the only thing I regretted was thinking they actually cared about my happiness instead of their image. My mom tried to play peacemaker, saying we should all calm down, but I was way past calming down. I asked them point blank, "If I stay with James, you'll really cut me off completely?" My dad looked me straight in the eye and said yes, they would. Said I needed to learn there are consequences to poor decisions. So I grabbed my bag and told them that was all I needed to know. I was almost to the door when my mom caught up to me, crying and asking where I was going. I told her I was going home to my boyfriend, who actually respects me as a person and not a puppet they can control. She grabbed my arm and tried to stop me from leaving, and I yanked away so hard that I stumbled into the wall and knocked down this ugly vase. I didn't even say sorry, just walked out and slammed the door behind me. I cried most of the drive back to my apartment, wiping my face at stoplights and trying to keep it together. When I got home, I just sat in my car for like 20 minutes trying to pull myself together before going inside. James was waiting up for me. It was past midnight at this point, and one look at my face told him everything he needed to know. He just held me while I cried some more, not saying anything, just being there. When I finally calmed down enough to talk, I told him everything. He got really quiet and asked if I was sure I wanted to give up my tuition money for him. Said he would understand if I needed to take a step back from our relationship to finish school. That maybe we could reconnect after I graduated. And that just made me cry more, because even when my parents were literally trying to bribe him out of my life, he was still putting my needs first. I told him absolutely not, that I wasn't letting my parents dictate my life choices through financial manipulation. He asked if I was sure like 10 times, and I finally had to grab his face and tell him, "Yes, I'm sure, stop asking me that." I have enough in savings to cover about half of my final semester's tuition if I stretch it super thin. James offered to loan me the rest, but I don't want to start our future with that kind of debt to each other. I'm applying for emergency financial aid and looking into last-minute scholarship options. I might have to take a semester off and work full-time to save up, which sucks because I was so close to finishing, but I'd rather delay my degree than let my parents control my life. A couple of my freelance clients have said they might be able to give me more hours, so that's something at least. My parents have been blowing up my phone with texts alternating between guilt trips, mom, and stern lectures about the real world. Dad. I finally just muted their conversations because I can't deal with it right now. My younger sister Rose texted me asking what happened because mom was crying all day. And when I told her the short version, she was horrified. She's always been the good daughter who does what they want, but even she thinks this is too far. I moved most of my important stuff to James's apartment since my lease is up in 3 weeks anyway. We were planning to move in together next month, but we're accelerating the timeline now. His place is tiny, and we're going to be on top of each other constantly, but it's worth it to be free from their control. James has been absolutely amazing through all of this. He keeps reminding me that we'll figure it out together, and I believe him. When we were packing up some of my stuff yesterday, he found this stupid photo booth strip from our third date and stuck it on his fridge with this dorky smile on his face. That's when I knew for sure I made the right choice. So that's where we are. Broke, stressed, but together. I'm applying for a loan today and looking for a cheaper phone plan since they'll probably kick me off the family plan soon too. Any advice on affordable health insurance options would be super appreciated because that's my next concern. Also, can we talk about how insane it is to offer someone money to break up with your daughter? Like, did they think that would work? And if it had worked, did they think I'd never find out? I keep replaying it in my head and getting angry all over again. Second update. Okay, so where do I even begin with everything that's happened since my last update? The past 6 months have been a literal roller coaster of emotions and stress and tiny victories. And I've been meaning to post for ages, but life has been so chaotic I barely remember to charge my phone most days. So first off, we survived. Like, actually survived the financial nightmare that happened after my parents cut me off. It hasn't been pretty or easy, but we're still here, still together. And honestly, in some weird ways, I'm almost grateful for what happened because I've learned so much about myself that I never would have discovered if I'd stayed in my comfort zone. Let's start with the college situation, because that was the most immediate crisis. After a ton of panicked emails and 3 separate meetings with the financial aid office, I managed to cobble together enough emergency aid and loans to cover my final semester. I had to drop one of my electives because it required expensive materials I couldn't afford anymore, but I was still on track to graduate. The first month in James's tiny apartment was an adjustment LMAO. We love each other, but suddenly sharing a bathroom the size of a postage stamp with someone who uses more hair products than I do? Yes, James has amazing hair. No, I'm not jealous at all. We had our first real fight when I accidentally used his expensive conditioner as shaving cream because the bottles look identical, and the shower lighting is terrible. He didn't speak to me for like 3 hours, which felt like eternity. I picked up 2 more freelance clients and started doing evening shifts at this cafe near campus to make ends meet. James took on extra hours and started doing some side work helping small businesses with their social media. Between the two of us, we were working something like 140 hours a week, which meant we barely saw each other except to collapse into bed at night and complain about our aching feet. Our diet for the first 2 months was basically ramen, peanut butter sandwiches, and whatever pastries I could bring home from the cafe. I lost like 10 pounds without trying, because some days I was literally too tired to eat. James was constantly making me these little protein packs with hard-boiled eggs and cheese that he'd leave in the fridge with heart-shaped Post-its. It was both adorable and depressing that we were communicating more through refrigerator notes than actual conversations. My parents tried calling me about once a week for the first month. I ignored most of them, but finally picked up one day when I was walking between classes. My mom started with the fake cheerful voice asking how I was, like nothing had happened. When I didn't play along, she switched to guilt tripping, saying how worried they were and how they just wanted to talk things through. I told her there was nothing to talk through, unless they were calling to apologize for trying to bribe my boyfriend and threatening to cut me off financially. She got all huffy and said I was still being dramatic, and that I needed to understand their perspective as parents, who only wanted the best for me. I literally laughed out loud in the middle of the quad and told her that if their version of best for me was controlling my personal life through financial manipulation, then we had very different definitions of the word best. That's when she dropped the real reason for the call. They had reconsidered and were willing to help me through this difficult time, if I agreed to meet with them and have a rational discussion about my future. I asked point blank if that meant accepting that James wasn't part of that future, and she did this long pause before saying they just wanted me to keep an open mind about all of my options. I hung up on her, then immediately had a mini panic attack on a bench because part of me was so tempted to just give in. We were so broke, so stressed, so exhausted all the time. But I knew that if I caved now, I'd be under their control forever. My sister Rose has been the one bright spot in this whole family drama. She still lives at home while she finishes high school, so she's been my spy on the inside. According to her, my parents have been telling everyone that I'm going through a phase and taking some time to find myself. They've apparently been acting like this whole estrangement was my choice, and they're just patiently waiting for me to come to my senses. Rose sneakily sent me some cash from her babysitting money a couple times, which made me cry in the break room at work. I told her to keep it. I don't want her getting in trouble. But it meant so much to know she was on my side. The most surreal moment came about 3 months in, when I ran into my mom at Target. I was buying discount shampoo and generic cold medicine, because of course I got sick during finals week. And suddenly there she was, looking perfectly put together with a cart full of stuff I used to take for granted. She looked shocked to see me, especially since I probably looked like absolute garbage. Unwashed hair, dark circles, wearing James's hoodie because all my laundry was dirty. For a second, I thought she might pretend not to see me, but then she got this concerned look and asked if I was feeling okay because I looked tired. I told her I had a cold and was in the middle of finals. She instantly went into mom mode, telling me I needed to get more rest and vitamin C, and offered to buy me some real medicine instead of that generic stuff. It was so bizarre because for a minute it felt normal, like nothing had happened between us. She asked about my classes and seemed genuinely interested when I told her I was doing well despite everything. Then she ruined it by asking if I was still with that boy, with this hint of distaste in her voice. When I said yes, James and I were still together and very happy. Her whole demeanor changed. She said my father and she were still hoping I'd reconsider my choices, and that the door was always open if I decided to be reasonable. Fun times. Despite all the stress and exhaustion, I was actually thriving academically. Without the safety net of my parents' money, I became super focused and determined. I wasn't going to waste a single class I was paying for with my own hard-earned money and loans. I studied harder than I ever had before, and it paid off. I made the dean's list for the first time ever. When I showed James my grades, he picked me up and spun me around in our tiny kitchen, nearly knocking over our little table. James has been my rock through all of this. Even when we're both exhausted and cranky, he never once suggested that maybe my parents were right or that our relationship wasn't worth the struggle. He's been working insane hours, but still finds time to do small things that make me feel loved. Leaving me little notes in my textbooks, bringing home a single flower he found on his walk to work, making me tea when I'm studying late. The biggest surprise came about 2 months ago when James was offered a management position. The owner is getting older and wants to step back from day-to-day operations, and he thinks James has the perfect combination of book knowledge and business sense. It came with a significant pay raise and actual benefits, which felt like winning the lottery after months of scraping by. Around the same time, one of my freelance clients recommended me to a friend who runs a small agency, and they offered me a part-time position that I could do while finishing school. The pay isn't amazing, but it's steady and there's potential for full-time after graduation. With our combined new income, we were finally able to start looking for a slightly bigger apartment. Our lease was ending anyway, and as much as we'd made that tiny studio work, we were both going crazy with the lack of space. We found this cute one-bedroom that's still affordable but has actual closets and a kitchen where more than one person can stand at a time. The day we signed the lease felt like such a milestone. We did that. Not my parents' money, not anyone's help, just us working our butts off and supporting each other. I might have cried a little when the landlord handed us the keys. Okay, I definitely cried. James has the embarrassing photo evidence. My parents have shifted tactics again now that they realize I'm actually making it on my own. My dad called last week with this weird semi-apology that wasn't really an apology at all. He said something about how he may have overreacted, but still believes he was acting in my best interest. Then he tried to casually mention that his friend Jeffrey's son was back in town after finishing law school and asked if I remembered him from that country club event years ago. I literally couldn't believe it. After everything, he was still trying to set me up with someone from our circle. I told him I was very happy with James, and unless he was calling to sincerely apologize for trying to bribe my boyfriend and cut me off financially, we had nothing to discuss. He got all huffy about how I was throwing away opportunities, and I just hung up. 5 minutes later, my mom texted saying I was being unnecessarily cruel to my father, who was extending an olive branch. I sent back a single text. An olive branch doesn't come with strings attached. Graduation is in 3 weeks, and I've been wrestling with whether to invite them. Rose says they expect to be there and have been telling family members they'll be attending. I honestly don't know if I want them there watching me accept the degree I finished without their help, or if their presence would just cast a shadow over the whole day. James says it's completely my decision, and he'll support whatever I choose, but I can tell he's worried about another confrontation. His mom is coming. She's the sweetest human alive and has basically adopted me at this point. And I don't want any drama ruining the day. The weirdest part of all this is that despite how hard these 6 months have been, I feel more like myself than I ever did before. Making my own choices, paying my own bills, working through problems without my parents' safety net, it's been terrifying but also freeing. Like I finally know what I'm capable of, and it's a lot more than I thought. Final update. It's been a while since my last post, and I've been avoiding this update because I wasn't sure how to put it all together. People have been asking what's up, so here it goes. Life's still a mixed bag. Some wins, some headaches, and a lot that's just unfolding, and I'm not totally sure where it's headed. Graduation was a big deal. I went back and forth about inviting my parents and finally sent them an invite. Not because I was over their crap, but because I didn't want to regret not giving them a chance to see me pull this off without their help. That morning, I was a nervous wreck. Couldn't even get my cap on straight because my hands were shaking. James tried to fix it, but has zero clue about hair stuff. His mom Sharon showed up early, all smiles and proud, which helped a little. They came, saw them lurking in the back row during the ceremony, mom in some fancy dress, dad in his usual suit like he was closing a deal. They didn't cheer or anything, just stood there watching. Afterward, I was snapping pics with James and Sharon when they walked over. Mom went for a hug, but I stepped back. Didn't mean it, just reflex. Dad gave James this stiff handshake. They said congrats, but it felt like they were just checking a box. Sharon suggested lunch, and they dodged it with some excuse about plans. I figured as much. They weren't there for me just to keep up appearances. A week later, Mom texted about a celebration dinner at their upscale place. I brushed it off but agreed to coffee instead. Curious what they'd say. Bad mood. They started with chit-chat about their lives, then grilled me on my future. I mentioned the full-time agency job, and Dad's face just fell, like I'd said I was begging on the street. Then Mom handed me an envelope. $5,000 check, graduation gift. I knew what was up. They said they'd reconsidered and would support me if I'd be sensible, meaning ditch James. I slid it back and said I was good without it. Dad got heated, said I was putting some guy over family. I told him it wasn't about James. It was about them trying to run my life. Left them sitting there, stunned. They've been blowing up my phone since. Mom with her worried act, Dad with his "we're concerned" lectures. I mostly tuned it out, focusing on what's next. James's bookstore gig has been a ride. He bought it from the owner, and yeah, it's tough. The place has issues. Old wiring gave out a while back, and stock's been tricky. But he's making it work. My agency pay bumped up, and with his hustle, we're not drowning anymore. Rent was getting insane, so we took a shot and got a mortgage on this little house. It's rough around the edges. Leaky spots, creaky floors, a weird ceiling stain. But it's ours. We're fixing it up bit by bit, and it's starting to feel like home, even if I'm always scrubbing paint off my hands and James is grumbling at DIY videos. We've got some wins, though. Last week, I was fed up with my parents' noise, so I called them on WhatsApp video, no heads up. They answered, looking thrown off, and I just went for it. Flipped the camera, showed them my Dean's List certificate pinned up, waved the mortgage papers with both our names, then walked outside to show James by the store with the owner sign. Back inside, I gave them a quick tour. I said, "You called James a nobody and offered him $10,000 to disappear because I deserved better. This is what that nobody helped me pull off in a year. No help from you, no strings." Dad's face went tight, and he started in. Said I was showing off and being petty. I told him it wasn't about that, just facts. They were wrong about us. He shot back that the house looks basic. and we're probably stretched thin. I said we're doing it our way, not theirs, and that's what counts. Mom jumped in, softer, saying she missed me. She apologized for the dating profiles, but then added she still thinks James and I are moving fast. I told her I'd do family stuff if they could keep it chill, but I'm done letting them judge James. Dad tried to argue, so I ended the call. Didn't need to hear more. They've backed off a bit since, but I'm not holding my breath. James and I are solid. Some days the house feels like a real win. Others we're tired and short with each other, but we're figuring it out. The store's a grind, money's tightish, and my parents are still out there, stuck in their ways. I don't know if they'll ever really get it or if I'll ever stop feeling weird about them,